Jonathan Ingram is the Vice President of Policy and Research at the Foundation for Government Accountability. Jonathan, you wrote an incredibly important chapter in Paragon's health reform book. Your chapter is titled Manage Effectively, Make Medicaid More Accountable. Jonathan, the scope of the problem is enormous. The federal government reported that prior to the pandemic, improper payments in Medicaid were approaching $100 billion annually. Jonathan, what drives these high improper payments in Medicaid?
When the public hears about improper spending in Medicaid, many think of provider fraud, doctors and hospitals filing fake claims and stealing millions of dollars. That's the kind of thing that makes headline news. And while that does happen, sort of the reality of the situation is the vast majority of these improper payments, more than 80% of it, come from eligibility errors. So that's when Medicaid enrolls someone in the program who isn't eligible or keeps them on the program after they become ineligible. There's all kinds of reasons for these errors. States accept self-reported information on a whole host of factors without any kind of follow-up. Countless audits have found enrollees with income above the eligibility threshold, people using stolen identities, enrollees in prison, people who no longer even live in the state, and even enrollees who've been dead for decades. And unfortunately, once someone is enrolled in the program, most states don't bother to look at their case for another year. So if someone gets a job or moves out of state or has any other change in their circumstances, most states simply don't catch that. So ultimately, states just have not done a great job of verifying eligibility on the front end and then moving enrollees out of the program when their circumstances change and they're no longer eligible.
So when you write that Congress has made this problem worse in one of the first pieces of coronavirus relief legislation that it passed last year, briefly explain that.
As part of the COVID response package, Congress provided states with some extra Medicaid funding, but there was a catch. In order to receive that funding, states had to agree not to remove anyone from the program. So in exchange for that extra funding, states had to agree to keep people who are ineligible on the program, which is quickly becoming an issue where the cost of covering those ineligible people is outweighing the extra money they're receiving from the federal government.
So the scope of the problem is enormous. What can states do to best protect people that are truly eligible and need Medicaid, as well as state taxpayers, from all this improper spending?
Sure, states have a ton of tools available to them to make Medicaid more secure and protect it for the truly needy. First, they need to get out of those handcuffs. They need to see if the cost of keeping those ineligible enrollees on the program outweighs that extra federal money. Second, they need to secure the front door by doing better verification. So stop accepting self-reported information, use the data that they already have in front of them, whether it's wage reports from employers, state tax filings, other data, and make sure that the people who are coming in the program are actually eligible. Third, do better back-end reviews. Regularly cross-check the data as you receive it. So again, those wages that they receive quarterly, death records that they receive monthly, lottery winnings, out-of-state notifications, and more. Everyone knows that circumstances change throughout the year, so it doesn't make sense to only look at those case files once a year. Set up the cross-checks so that if there is a change in circumstances, it's flagged, it's reviewed, and it's acted on. And finally, do a full-scale audit of the whole program. Everything from eligibility processes to managed care contracts to enforcement and recovery efforts. For too many policymakers, Medicaid is really sort of this black box where they appropriate money and don't know what they're getting for it. And a full-scale audit would help shine some light on what taxpayers are actually paying for.
This level of improper payments wouldn't be tolerated by private businesses, and it shouldn't be tolerated by government. Jonathan, thanks for your important work on this chapter. Hopefully states implement many of your recommendations.